Few artists have created a visual world as instantly recognisable as Frida Kahlo. Her fearless use of colour has inspired generations of artists, and it's still influencing art, fashion and design today. So, for this colour palette, I'm taking inspiration from Frida herself, her art and the extraordinary world of her home and garden at Casa Azul to create my own 9-colour Frida Kahlo inspired palette. I'm starting the palette with an homage to the artist herself, a flesh tone I've called La Pintora, the painter. Frida used her own image in many of her portraits, so I'm planning to try to recreate that in my mandala design. Different flesh tones are quite easy to create, and you can use just the primaries with some white. For La Pintora, I decided to use the earthy equivalents, a yellow ochre base with burnt sienna, with just a touch of cadmium red and ultramarine blue. I lightened the mix with some titanium white. I'm painting La Pintora onto my Viva la Frida mandala design. This is a work in progress coming soon, so subscribe if you like to catch it when I upload the video. I want a shadow and a highlight to complement the flesh tone, so I added a touch of raw umber to the base mix for the shadow and lightened it with some yellow ochre and a little more white for the highlight. Because I'm using a lot of heavy body paint, I'm adding pouring medium to the mix to let it down a little. The pigment intensity in these golden heavy body paints is high, so you don't get any colour loss. Next in the palette is Casa Azul, the blue house, Frida Kahlo's famous home in Mexico. Its vivid blue walls have become an iconic part of Frida's visual world, so I wanted a saturated, full-of-life blue with just the slightest lean towards green. The base colour is phthalo blue, green shade, with titanium white as the secondary. The colour mixing magic here is from nickel azo yellow, a wonderfully transparent golden yellow. I use it almost as a colour adjuster, just enough to gently push the blue towards green without losing the intensity of the blue. You can see the complexity of the colour here, and on the Viva la Frida work in progress, you can see how it goes onto the surface to represent Frida's beloved home. From the intense blue of Casa Azul, I'm moving to something much softer. Silver yucca is inspired by those beautiful silvery blue-green leaves you see in yucca, eucalyptus and other waxy foliage typical of a Mexican garden. Starting with a titanium white base, I'm adding phthalo green and phthalo blue in equal quantities as the secondary colour, although I managed to get most of the green on my fingers. Never mind, you only need a little. To avoid this becoming just a nice green blue, I'm adding a couple of drops each of raw umber and Payne's Grey to Dirty. I wanted a cool, muted green with just a hint of blue, something calm and dusty to give the brighter colours in this palette room to breathe. This is lovely. Birds and animals appear throughout Frida's work, but I kept coming back to her parrots, bright, tropical and almost startlingly alive. So my second green is Parrot Feather Green, a vivid, yellow-leaning tropical green inspired by the parrots that shared Frida's world and found their way into her paintings. I started with phthalo green, then titanium white, that lovely azo yellow, and a touch of raw umber to knock the chemical green feel the mix had. Keep watching though, as I add something else to the mix in the palette evaluation stage later. You can see where I'm going with it though, that lovely parrot green. Gorgeous. Jungle Agave is inspired by the bold, sculptural foliage that surrounds Frida's world, rich, dense greens that appear throughout her paintings and the gardens of Casa Azul. I wanted this green to give the palette depth and structure. I started with phthalo green, then added Payne's Grey for complexity, and burnt umber for warmth and earth. I used the azo yellow again to tie these colours together, and because it is a really beautiful colour to mix with. Palette creation is about looking across a set of colours and assessing their compatibility, and I thought the darker greens needed some adjustment, so I added a slug of cadmium yellow to both of them to really bring out the green vibrancy. You can see the difference here. I think these foliage colours are now done and dusted. I also adjusted the shade cards so you can still work off them as they are. Terracotta earth is inspired by the sun-baked clay, pottery and warm architectural colours that run through Frida's Mexican world. I wanted something rich and earthy, but still glowing with orange. So my mix is cadmium orange, burnt sienna and azo yellow. I also added a slug of La Pintora to help tie the palette together. I added half the burnt sienna first, Now I'm adding the rest. It's easy to add, but not so easy to take out. This is glorious. Now for marigold. Marigolds are deeply woven into Mexican visual culture. Their blazing orange and golds are almost impossible to ignore. I wanted to bring some of that warmth into this palette, full of sunlight and life. And because I'm using it for flowers, I've mixed 3 shades to give those petals real dimension and depth. The base colour for each is nickel azo yellow with cadmium orange and cadmium yellow. This gives the base marigold. The lighter shades get more cadmium yellow, and the lightest shade gets an extra dollop of titanium white. I had a good old test of these shades. I want them to be distinctive enough without losing their gradation effect. Here on my final palette testing stone, you can see what I mean. Now we're really turning up the colour. This flower spills over walls and through gardens in great bursts of pink, and it's perfectly at home in the vivid visual world I'm building around Frida. I wanted an unapologetically bold, hot pink, rich, joyful, and almost impossible to ignore. I'm starting with equal quantities of quinacridone magenta and naphthol red light. I'm adding a part of titanium white to help lighten and for opacity. The colour is so vibrant and pretty, and you can see this to best effect on my black palette testing stone. My final colour is Coral Paradise. This one comes from the meeting point between pink and orange, the warm glow of sunsets, painted flowers, and the rich sunlit colours that surround Frida's world. It's soft but still wonderfully bold, and it gives the palette one last burst of pinky pizzazz. I'm starting again with equal parts magenta and naphthol red, then adding some cadmium orange. Add titanium white to taste depending on how pale you want it. I kept it quite strong. You can see on the black stone how the coral colour glows and catches the eye. So that's the Frida Kahlo inspired palette complete. I always make a palette stone to keep my swatches on so I know what I have, and you can see here how the paints all turned out. More importantly, you can see how the palette works together. My Viva la Frida mandala design is all set to go now, so check back or subscribe for the full how-to. I've put Frida right in the centre, so I've been experimenting with how to do a face on a mandala, a first for me. I can't wait to complete the project, and I've made enough of the palette to do a larger project too. The beauty of colour mixing is that you can create a truly unique piece that you can adjust to your own preferences. Experimentation is key, and I think it is a creative act just as much as painting. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you have had a go yourself. Above all, enjoy.